Now, we've got a few moments with two of our remaining speakers from the first session, which was a very broad session and quite a lot to take in. In fact, mind-blowing, the huge amount of stuff in both your presentations. So I've got some questions from people who are out there on the floor, and one of my first questions for Lawrence is, we're looking, all of your work looks down on the Earth. You work for NASA, who also look the other direction out into space. Could you talk to us about what's your feeling about, should we be focusing more on Earth considering the pressing problems, or is there still a need to be looking out into space as well? What do you think?
I certainly think it's a balance. I mean, so, that the exploration, I think people have sort of labeled exploration to certain things they're looking away from the planet. But I would say that the exploration is also looking back at the planet. And one of the things that we've been doing in sort of connecting up within the sciences within NASA is doing sort of planetary comparisons. And so when you look at Venus and Mars and Earth together, you can understand the fact that one of the reasons why Mars is the way it is it didn't have a carbon cycle to help capture and make sure that the water stayed. And the reason you didn't have, and the reason why Venus is this runaway greenhouse system is you didn't have a water cycle. And so that by doing that exploration and understanding the other planets and understanding other sorts of other things is you can help understand Earth better. And that's also put in a plug for the International Space Station, is the fact that that's provided a platform for us to be testing out sensors on a short-term time frame so we can understand, do we want that? Do we want those type of sensors on a satellite for longer term? And then there's also just the broader views out into the universe where it's sort of just inspiring. And it's driving technology and it's driving innovation and ideas. And that's, feeding into other sorts of things that may be coming back in other connections, whether it's new technologies or other sorts of things. And I guess it's an all-of-above approach. I think what we're trying to recognize is the fact that by showing some of the returns to Earth and showing some of the returns to people is the fact that it is these longer-term investments in science and science more broadly that does show these returns, either near-term or longer-term.
And that's a good diplomatic answer, because obviously you can't say, no, NASA should stop looking up into space, we should focus on Earth. But I take your point, because it's a very valid point. So we do have all this data. There's only one person in the world that I could think that to ask that where I would really sit up and take notice to the answer to this one, Bob, which is that we want to simulate the Earth. You said we want to have a simulation that we can run models in. Do you think it's possible? Are you confident that we can build that complex a model with all of those factors that you talked about, thermohaline circulation, magnetosphere? Is it a possibility?
I think it is. It'll take more time, and it will take a big step in compute power as well. But number one, you have to understand the underlying physics, which is the core science. We have to know what's going on and how these different processes speak to each other. Once we know that, we can begin to model them and communicate between them to see the net effect, because all these feedbacks are quite difficult. They're negative feedback, positive feedback, non-linear feedbacks, and they're very hard to model. And I would say we've grown up in a world of science where every science is its own silo, and every government actually is siloed as well, and every university department is siloed, and every conference is siloed, and every publication, every peer review cycle is siloed. So all these silos that we have built don't really communicate together very well across horizontally. But that's a new science, and I think we are slowly coming to grips with that, coupling together the sciences and the models. But eventually you need a lot of compute power, because every new incremental element takes compute time. So we don't have the strong enough computers right now. But the next horizon on the supercomputer front is what's called exaflop computing, which is an era maybe within the next 10 years where we will have 10 to the power 18 floating points per second possible in the top end of the supercomputing. And that could fundamentally model this level of complexity. By the way, the human brain is probably equally complex, and that's another challenge of the same ilk. heading towards the exaflop era before it really gets any answers on how we model the human brain. But to answer your question, I think it's possible. It's probably on a 10-year horizon. And all the data that's being collected will funnel in to the models. And the incremental science that is being developed will funnel in. The mathematics will have to improve. And the compute power, it was the horsepower underneath, has to be there. And I think it'll all happen. NASA most likely will be one of the preeminent organizations that gets there first. Europe has, Japan, now China's in the race, and even India. So there are very strong modeling centers being developed around the world. Even Australia, the Bureau of Meteorology, is quite good in modeling as well. So I think this is a race. This is equivalent to a space race that's emerging. Who can come to grips with the complexity of the planet fast enough to see more or less what's around the corner?
Well, and that leads me into a great question for both of you. It's happening around the world. What about Brisbane and Queensland? How do we fit in here into this picture? Are we a world player on that stage? Have we got the potential to be? What do we need to do to make sure that we go forward? Because there's already such amazing stuff happening here. So how do you see Brisbane and Queensland fitting into the picture? And do you think we can be the next sort of epicenter for one of these industries?
Well, Lawrence, let me take a shot first. Well, Queensland is well positioned because it's on the doorstep of Asia, and Asia is where all the brain power is, quite honestly. Australia just woke up to this a little bit late. If you're in Asia today, you just see the dramatic progress that Asia has made across the board in the infrastructure, in society, on and on and on. But they had 5,000 years of knowledge to draw upon. We didn't actually have that unless we turned to our own First Nations. They probably have a little more knowledge if we had turned to them faster, which I think we're starting to turn to the First Nation to get that knowledge. But anyways, we are on the doorstep of Asia, and that's a very positive force scientifically. China, in the absence of religion, I think has adopted science as its religion, and in particular, it's adopted digital science. So China is going to find itself, I think, leading the world in the adaptation of digital science. And we should be following that. And just as much as NASA is the leader from the United States, I think China is the leader here in Asia. Japan, as we all know, moved ahead in just after World War II. For 50 years, it was a leader as well. And we're all asking the question, where's Japan gone? And I think the answer is, they're about to show up with a gigantic leap in technology, whether it's the new bullet trains at 500 kilometers an hour, or harvesting energy from space with the reflectors down to Earth. So they're into some very, very new technology. And we're on the threshold of all that, and I should talk about India as well, but we should take advantage of that. Queensland has a history of innovation. Queensland has a good government, entrepreneurial government. It understands startups, knowledge society, and it's a beautiful living environment to attract people. I do remember the first effort to bring Japanese down here in a specialized development for high-tech startup environments, and didn't quite work out, but a lot of good high-tech came out of it. So my judgment is the spirit of Queensland, the spirit of Brisbane, and then the value of the Great Barrier Reef sitting right here as an asset, and the whole appearance of Asia and its dynamic growth give you here the opportunity to take advantage of everything you know and run with it. So I'm one of your supporters, and I think you've got a good state and a good town to launch. So if I can be a part of it, I'd like to be.
Oh, there we go.
Just add one quick thing that I would add is that I would say that Brisbane could make quite a name and quite a huge contribution by helping to blend the social and economic behavioral sciences in with the natural and physical sciences. I would say that's an area that I think we need to bridge that. And there are some activities related to what they call integrated assessment modeling, which is trying to bring the economics into some of these physical systems and all. But I would say that that's an area that has real potential for, for Brisbane or for QUT or others, and really to help, and then maybe the spatial industry in Queensland and Australia more broadly, to help push that. I think that's going to set it up for whatever decision makers at whatever level and whatever sector. And so I think there's some real opportunities there. And so if Queensland could lead that, and Brisbane could lead that, you would make huge contributions and get a lot of people starting following you.
Well, thank you very much. Fantastic. It's great to hear these kinds of impressions of this state, because I've had that same impression for more than 20 years, and it's been hard to get Queenslanders to sort of wake up and say, wow, we are very smart here, we are really clever. So thank you for your thoughts on that. Now, we could talk for another hour, obviously, but we have some other speakers. So could we please thank again Lawrence Friedel and Bob Bishop for their fantastic presentations, and can I give you your gifts? This is a glass cooler monitor.